Are we two? Thank you very much. Down with xenophobia, down. Down with racism, down. Thank you very much for the invitation and on this important discussion. As usual, before I'm asked to speak about something else, I want to speak about something else. And I feel that I must express my support and solidarity with the 11 students that are being charged for protesting against the Israeli embassy-sponsored concert. That's where I want to start. And I fully support the Nihau's call for the immediate withdrawal of all the charges against all of those students. The hosting of the concert, which was backed by the Israeli embassy and endorsed by Zionist lobbies, violated the Wits University SRC support for an endorsement of the cultural boycott of Israel. I fully agree with Nihau that the university has shamelessly sacrificed its independence, compromised its reputation, and demonstrated a disconcerting level of intolerance by censoring and silencing the dissenting views. COSATU has been campaigning for many years against the brutal oppression of the people of Palestine by the Israeli regime, and we should applaud, not condemn, those who take a stand for freedom and democracy of the people of Palestine. Now, coming back to what I've been asked to speak about. Xenophobia, social cohesion and violence. Dr. Landau's book on this issue is called Exorcising the Demons. And I could have added a few more demons in our society. Corruption, gender-based violence, drug and alcohol abuse, and others. But in my view, these are rooted in the set of even bigger problems and bigger demons: the unemployment, poverty, and inequality, which provide a fertile breeding ground for all of these other demons to prosper. On unemployment, we ending this week with some news that were not good. From Statistics South Africa Quarterly Labor Force Survey, which reveals that we are not winning in the battle against unemployment. 100,000 more people have lost or are unemployed or have been added into the queues of the unemployed, now taking the so-called official unemployment figure from 24.9 to 25.2. But you and me agree that that's not what we consider as the real unemployment rate. The unemployment rate, according to those statistics, now stands at 36.7%, the expanded definition of counting everybody who will be willing to do a productive job but is now forced to go and cut some hair at the corner of the street, not counted as unemployed in terms of the Statistics South Africa. Which means that our unemployment rate now is as bad as it was in 2008, the time when we were hit by the world economic crisis, in which we lost over 1 million jobs in a short period of 22 months. If this trend then continues, not only shall we meet the government targets of creating 5 million jobs in 2020, which will itself be a catastrophic, but A society with those levels of unemployment can never sustain social cohesion, especially when the victims of that unemployment are young ones. It means if we don't address that principal societal problem, the demons will just be unleashed, all of them. Mass unemployment creates conditions for the demon of xenophobia, which we remember today, 5 years later, after the disgraceful episodes when a worker fought a worker, an African fought an African. 60 were killed, dozens were raped, and over 100,000 were displaced. We have fought relentlessly against such attempts to shift the blame for poverty and unemployment on our fellow African workers and make them scapegoats for South Africa's failure to address its fundamental structural deficiencies or problems. We must link these outrages to the underlying social crisis and turn people's anger against their real enemy, the capitalist system of production, distribution, and exchange. Poverty and inequality are the twin brother and sister of unemployment, and they too play a role in undermining social cohesion, especially given that we are now the most unequal society in the world. The Gini coefficient index measures how much the distribution of income amongst individuals or households within an economy deviates from a perfectly equal distribution. 0 represents the perfect quality, whilst the 100 implies perfect inequality. South Africa stands at 63:1 today, higher than anywhere else in the world. That's our second problem. At one extreme, we see the obscenity of high salary and bonuses of top business executives. We make an example in this speech of the CEO of Investec, Mr. Stephen Kosef, whose remuneration of 30,736,385 rands, or a 2,561,385 a month, 1 month, which is a little bit higher than what the president earns in a year, by another 100,000. That's what. That's how you should look at it. And I know what people will say in my Twitter account. Oh no, that's an investor, and the president is paid by us. But look at that comparison, and look at what workers are earning in South Africa. 50% in 2011 were earning 3,033 rands and below. 50%. Yet rough estimates for a national minimum living level is about 4,500. Those living below that 4,500, which is about 60% of the South African workers, are actually living in poverty. Minimum wages set through the sectoral determinations fall way below that minimum living level. At 2,118, which is the sectoral determinations, means that those workers are earning 1,000 209 times less than what Mr. Kosef is earning. Now we accept that managers have perhaps higher responsibilities, they invest and they keep the this and that, but surely this is completely unjustifiable. And we must never forget that most workers earning these low wages have to support as many as up to 10, or in fact up to 12 of unemployed members of their families. This then demolishes this phony argument that employed workers become a privileged elite with different interests than those of the unemployed. And that's why COSATU have supported a national minimum wage and rejecting the fallacy that the national minimum wage will lead to more unemployment on the basis that many firms will not be able to pay and so will retrench workers to or close down. International experience discredit these claims for what they are, propaganda and lies. The experience in Brazil under President Lula proved the opposite, that increased minimum wages and social grants and incentives to small businesses create a demand for goods and services and lead to faster growth, more jobs, lower inflation, and undoubtedly contribute to greater social cohesion, which is the challenge that South Africa is facing at this moment. A national minimum wage, therefore, will be a very significant step towards ensuring greater levels of cohesion in our society. Second transition that is not a rhetoric, but that constitutes real programs to ensure that our people can achieve what they are calling for. Radical economic transformation to address those triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality is the real answer to the crisis of xenophobia in our country. The demons of violence and that of xenophobia frequently appear in community service protests everywhere. Whilst we must condemn such violence, and by the way, South Africa is simply challenged by the crisis of violence, and no one knows exactly what is the root cause of it. But all of us acknowledge that as a problem. You know, last year we did a survey amongst COSATU members to ask them what do they think about violence and protest or strike action. And a lot of them, about 50%, said, no, you can never ever have any solution. You can never ever succeed to be heard by management unless we have some of this thing called violence playing a role. It's a belief, and the Wits University itself commissioned a study by SWAP looking at the protest in the service delivery protests. And it came back with the same answer, where people say that the only way you can get some mayor coming to listen is when there is a smoke. Without that, the mayor doesn't come or the ministers will not come. And I think we've got to debate that issue as a society as to how people come to a conclusion that the only way to be heard is that there must be violence. And this violence, we know 5 years ago, suddenly turned from targeting tires to targeting people. 60 of them then died. That seemed to me that's an issue that South Africa have to talk about, the culture of violence. And sometimes we see that culture in our statistics about the crime and how violent the fellows who are behind it can be including women abuse, how violent that crime can be, including not just violence, about violence that nobody can have heard of anywhere else in the world, as we saw in the case of Anand Boysen. Lastly, we've got to address the issue of education. I know that we have made tremendous strides in ensuring that the doors of learning are opened, but let's face it, we are not anywhere close where we think we should be. Firstly, our education leaks in a frightening level. If you count the numbers of people who go into grade R and those who eventually arrive at grade 12, you will see that almost at about 2/3 do not arrive at grade 12. That's the source of our problem, in that the people who we count as unemployed should not be in the streets in the first place, should be in the universities, including the institutions such as this Witwatersrand. As long as we don't have a solution to that, then we have people who carry and who becomes the arms, the limbs, the drivers of this violence, this crime, and all that goes with it. But we've got to talk about the other corruption. Sorry. 1 minute. The corruption in the private sector that very few are willing to confront. Every time South Africa speaks about corruption, our image, the first image, is the 4x4, the mayor, the councillor, now the Guptas, and their aeroplanes and exercise of absolute power. By the way, I was saying to myself, remembering the images of 19 years ago, looking at the crowds of people who were in the inauguration of Nelson Mandela, which took place today, 19 years ago, and I said that to me, there's always two things that tells you whether the nation have been freed or not. The first one is that the nation must be free in that its citizens must determine their own destiny. And it means that they must stop any external influence, particularly from the former colonial powers that way. The second one is that the resources that would have been looted during the era of colonialism must be returned to their rightful owners. This thing of these planes was undermining the first one in a big way, that our country can easily be mortgaged, easily, by the powerful interest of the elite in society. And I've spoken about the second one already. We've got to speak about this collusion between the private sector and the public sector, because after all, there will be no corruption in the public sector if there was no corruption in the private sector system itself. And as long as we are allowing that, because I'm now convinced, unless we can defeat the scourge and the phenomenon of corruption, there will be no addressing of the fundamental issue of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. As long as no businessman can do business on the basis of the capacity and the innovation of their skills, and that they must always grease the hand of some important political player, then it means that our future and our, in particular, claims to prosperity will be forever put in a longer and longer distance from where we are. All of these things, xenophobia, violence, and social division, which we are discussing today, will not be addressed until we address the underlying problems that feed and that becomes wheels to all of these demons. Thank you very much.